it, just like a muscle, can atrophy when it's not being used. And I pity the day that we humans are reduced to the mindless automatons that we gripe about replacing us. Well, we could potentially become mindless automatons, if we lose the ability to hone our critical thinking skills by figuring things out ourselves, using the information that we've received, the information that comes to us a gazillion times faster than we could possibly get it ourselves.
What makes us so special? And why isn't AI just simply going to replace us all? That's why I'm sitting down with educators, researchers, and practitioners to have an open and honest discussion about the human impact of AI. I'm Doug Atkinson, and join me for the Human Conversation. Dr. Joe Perez, Amazon bestselling author, data analytics expert, international keynote giver. Thanks for being part of the Human Conversation.
Well, thank you so much, sir. This is honestly, this is a wonderful honor for me, and I'm delighted to participate.
Well, you have been in our spotlight for quite some time now. I mean, since we launched the Insight Gym, you've been as prominent as anyone on our YouTube channel, and we thank you very much for all that great content. But you've also been out there on all kinds of keynote adventures and certainly engaging and talking to folks. Tell me a little bit more about kind of what you are hearing out there with regard to how we're going through this moment in time, this transition that I would argue is heading toward this AI future.
Sure. Well, again, Doug, thank you for your kind words. I've been privileged to speak in quite a number of different conferences and, more than a dozen countries over the last couple 3 years now. And what I'm finding is, first on the data side of things, that's the topic that I speak about most often. I talk about data-driven decision making. I talk about leveraging beauty and brains for effective data storytelling. I talk about how any moron can click on a mouse and put out something that looks nice, but isn't actionable. Can you really get something out of it? Can decision makers derive the insights that they need to move their business forward? That is one topic that has been a hot button. Another hot button, I mentioned data-driven decision making. Do you go with your gut or do you go with the data, or should it be something in between? Is it a combination of the two? And in data governance, I talk about the guardrails that need to be in place, to ensure that what we're doing with the data is correct, that you're not just going off on a tangent, that you're not just allowing your biases to skew the course that you're going to take based on the input that you've received. And I see AI is having a great deal of influence on that. When people start trusting what they see on the screen instead of using their own brains, to figure out where they're going, then we're in a heap of trouble if we're going to trust some algorithm to give us what we need and be lazy and take what it has to say instead of digging in for the truth ourselves. And that's one of the things that I advocate in the different realms that I encounter, the different industries to whom I speak, and the different topics that I bring up. That's always a given. Is to are you using your head? Are you using your own mental capacity? Are you using your own insight rather than depending on some tool to give it to you?
Well, and that's been the state of the art for the past however long now, 20 years, where it's really been about data scientists looking at the information and making determinations and interacting. And I think we've tried to make it as easy as possible through the innovation of technology over those 20 years, where you get to this idea of data, low code, no code, and kind of
Right.
enabling data scientists with these tools and technologies that allow them to very easily be able to see the information. But ultimately, the state of the art up until now has been that there is a carbon-based life form at the other end of that presentation layer. On the other pane of the side of the pane of glass, as they always talk about, there's a pane of
Right.
glass. And that human is making the decisions around, what further to look at, what decisions to make based upon that, what to present, what to ignore, what needs to be captured differently. And so, are we fully optimized there? I mean, inevitably, it strikes me that with all those people involved, there's going to be, kind of an inequity with regard to talent and skill.
Mhm. Right, because not everyone has the same specialty, right? They're going to you're gonna play off the strengths and weaknesses of different individuals. There's going to be a diversity of opinion. There's going to be a diversity of ideas, and I suppose that's the beauty of it, is if I'm good at X and you're good at Y, we come together and put our skills together. We come up with a better solution. People who don't tap into that, people who get lazy and just accept, what the algorithm says should be the answer, uh, you're going to get into a heap of trouble doing that. And I like what you said about the state of the art. As long as there is a carbon based life form, I love that. Who's calling the shots or who is looking at all these different tools, all these different things available, then we can move forward. I have nothing against the tools. It would be like someone arguing that a chainsaw is a bad thing because you don't get to use your muscles with the axe and chopping the tree or whatever. But if you've got 14 trees down in your yard after a hurricane or some kind of ice storm or whatever, you're based with all you have is an axe. It's going to take you forever to get that debris cleared out. But if you've got the right machines, the right tools, and the right people who know how to use those tools, you can clear that up in a much more quickly. So, griping about the tool isn't the answer. It's how we use the tools, right? We use the tool rather than letting the tool use us.
Well, so let's talk about that because this is where I become concerned. It's my supposition that when you begin to do data analytics, there is basically a single answer that is the best possible answer. And the challenge right now is that there's a varying degree of decision making skill. So you're going to get, if you present this information to a bunch of people, humans, you're going to get the, typical, distribution curve of some people are going to get it right, very right. Some people are going to get it very wrong. And most people are going to get it kind of right in the middle.
Right. The
And
bell curve or whatever it might look
yeah, the
like.
bell curve. Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my concern is that that's the problem that AI is going to pry away at, is that there is
Mhm.
an optimal answer to everything. And if you just put more horsepower against it, you don't need the human frailty of that kind of middle of the bell. You can get everybody to be, you can get every decision to be optimal at the low end of the right hand side, um,
Right.
because there really is only one optimal answer, and humans don't necessarily always arrive at it, and so that's why we need this new technology.
Uh, Yeah, and that's a compelling argument because you want to get to the optimal solution. You want to get to the most efficient answer. Yes, and using the tools to the right, in the right manner. Perhaps I don't know, maybe thinking of it as more of a lever than a crutch, right? We overly depend upon the tools, it's going to become a crutch. And then what happens to our own cognitive reasoning capacity? What is it that happens to our own ability to arrive at C by getting from point A to point B and understanding the nuances and the ramifications of how
Right.
we get to that decision? We lose all that
What
and we
what
lose the
what does
capacity.
happen? Right,
Yeah,
what does happen?
exactly.
I mean,
Right, right.
this is why I wanna have these conversations. It's like,
Yeah,
what
no,
begins
it's
to happen
sure.
when we do realize we can't compete at
Uh-huh.
finding the optimal answer
Right.
with this massive data processing
Sure.
and contextual layering of information, it is going to always outperform
It is. Right, when it
us.
comes to speed, consistency, the inability to get tired, there's no way, we humans can compete. But we humans are the ones who program this. We humans are the ones who feed the information into these models. We humans are the ones that still have the edge when it comes to all the different nuances, all the gray areas, all the shading, all the, okay, yes, getting this is a straight line from A to B, but what about all the other ramifications? What about the historical context, the cultural context, the operational context that has not been fed into the algorithm, so to speak, to come with the optimal. So yeah, in a certain context, let's say 80% of the time, it is going to be the right decision, achieved at by the most efficient means possible. But what about all these other considerations that have not been fed into the model? The model knows nothing about that. So we humans are still in the loop. I see it using it rather than as a crutch to become overly dependent, use it as a lever to make it into a force multiplier, right? We let the model, the computer, the AI, the whatever, we let it do what it does best. Those bazillion, quadrillion, I'm making up numbers now, all the different, however many computations per nanosecond that this crazy thing can do. Let it do that and arrive at and, present the choices to us as humans. We have the discernment. We still have the edge on fine tuning and turning the diamond to look at all the different, reflections and nuances and capabilities and so forth that the machine cannot do. And I think once we realize that, this is supposed to stimulate our creativity rather than stifle it, then I think we can go a long ways. Yeah, leverage that tool, use it to the best of the ability, right? Let it guide your thinking, but still exercise the control, the oversight over the entire process, and continue to think through the analytical process. The cognitive reasoning while we still have it, because it just like a muscle can atrophy when it's not being used. And I pity the day that we humans are reduced to the mindless automatons that we gripe about replacing us. Well, we could potentially become mindless automatons, if we lose the ability to hone our critical thinking skills by figuring things out ourselves, using the information that we've received, the information that comes to us a gazillion times faster than we could possibly get it ourselves. That's where we have the edge, and that's where we can utilize the incredible benefit that we have from these amazing tools.
This is interesting because, as you just clearly demonstrated indirectly, AI doesn't have charisma. It doesn't
No,
have personality necessarily. It doesn't have emotion it doesn't understand the political landscape
right.
necessarily
It can mimic things, but it doesn't understand. You're right. It can approximate, it can mimic, it can pretend,
and
but
well, and
it's not real.
decisions are optimal decisions oftentimes are not necessarily for the organization. It's not necessarily the most efficient decision. It's the most optimal decision takes into consideration these political influences and
Right.
and implications. So I think about this, future that sometimes I worry about, where these salespeople are going to come and they're going to present to these large organizations a technology that can eliminate the entire 11th floor because it doesn't have to do that thing anymore. You can just subscribe to this, and all these agents will do it for those people. And while that may be best decision empirically for the organization,
Mhm.
it does not take into consideration the political elements that might be at play there, meaning maybe
Right.
the decision maker happens to have a lot of friends who work on the 11th floor and doesn't necessarily want to obliterate it all, or whatever it is. So talk a little bit about kind of what makes us human with regard to those decision making factors, right? Moreover than just the binary, this is the optimal empirical decision.
Right.
What
Right.
is the what are the in a larger decision making environment, what are some of
Sure.
those political implications and other factors?
I'm glad you said that, Doug, because you hit the nail on the head when you use that word binary, and we think about what binary means, right? Binary: true, false, left, right, black, white, on, off, plus, minus, right, wrong. There are so many. There is an infinite number of permutations and possible nuances and gray areas in between left and right, up and down, and so on and so forth. These things, again, that are not fed into the LLM, the things that are not provided as can't possibly be provided as part of the training, things that we come up with instantaneously, extemporaneously, right? The machine is incapable of extemporaneous instant thought. The machine is capable of very rapidly, almost to the nth degree, of repeating the information that it has been fed. But as far as generating independent, completely off the scale, off the cuff, a thought that comes in an instant, that comes extemporaneously, it can't possibly do that. It can try to approximate it because, it does the repetition so incredibly quickly. But to understand the meaning behind it, to have the emotional gravitas that it takes to take on the full weight of the implications of what happens if I say something. The only way that a machine can know what the implication of a decision is if it has been told, if it has been trained, if it has been enumerated. Sometimes these things can't be enumerated until you are right on top of the situation, until it just happens in the moment, as it were, which is where we as humans shine, having been, our God-given gift of creativity, being able to come up with these things that the machine cannot. It may look like it's creating something new, but all it is it's moving ones and zeros. It's moving pixels. It's moving, things that were already part of its makeup, part of its training at some way, shape, form, or fashion. We humans, this happens on the fly.
Well,
And
well, so I would question that. This is one of my other kind of sticking points, is the idea that we overrate our creativity, that
Mhm.
we are just ultimately, this has been one of my takes, that we're LLMs ourselves, that we're only creative in the influences, that we have. If you ask Bruno Mars why he creates music the way he creates it, and where did he get the influences? He'll say that, he listened to his father's jazz records and Motown and all these things. And so Bruno Mars is creating his music from the influences that he
Sure.
received. He didn't receive influences from, necessarily from Bach and Beethoven. It was from, soul and rhythm and blues. And so he's creating output that is more along those lines. James, it sounds a lot like James Brown to me in many cases. And
That's
so,
true.
is he uniquely creative, or is he just his own LLM?
That's an amazing observation because in a manner of speaking, yes, because we're a product of our nature and our nurture, right? We are a product of the experiences that we have had that mold and shape the thinking process that we go through. Bruno Mars is not going to compose in the same way that Clementi, and Bach isn't going to sound like Beethoven, and Vivaldi isn't going to sound like Schubert, and Baryshnikov isn't going to have the same dance moves as Nadia Comaneci, whatever other famous person that you can think of, whether you're talking about artistic dance or expression musically, whether whatever instrument, a piano or a trombone or a flute or whatever, you know, uh, yeah, that's right. They are a product of how whatever environment that they've been in, whatever influences that they've gone through. In a manner of speaking, it is like an LLM. I can see the correlation, but the difference being is that we are analog. We are not digital. Okay, the digital has to be a certain specific quantity, a certain specific number. It is quantitative, whereas we are qualitative. Okay, there is no limit to the shades of nuance that we can give to a performance that we have. Whether I play the piano, and I'm not going to play the
Well,
same piece
I was
the
just
same
gonna
way every
say, I
time.
mean,
Yeah.
there is a limit. There are only 88 keys on a piano.
Okay.
I mean,
True. True. But
there
when
is a
you
limit to
you're
the
right.
number of colors you can use on a palette. There's a limit to the number of notes
Right.
you can create on a
Sure.
sheet of music. There is a limit. And so to a certain degree, if you're limited to that environment of creativity on those types of, expressions, that we are kind of working the same way
Mhm.
as an LLM.
That's true. There are a lot of similarity. And yeah, even the piano, there's only 88 keys, right? And there's only a certain number of colors. Well, I would argue that there's an infinite number of colors, but only a finite subset of that is what the human eye can perceive, right? There are things beyond,
True.
so we could talk about the intensity of the volume of a note that is played. Is it legato or is it staccato? How quickly is it being played? How slowly is it being played? How it's being, is it an arpeggio or are you just doing chords? So yeah, while we're limited to 88 keys, there's a billion different things that you can do with those keys, the combination thereof, the volume and the pitch and the sound and the intensity and the speed and everything else, all those mixed in with the emoting of the moment, the emotion that it conjures is something that we respond to that with a level of enjoyment or a level of annoyance or whatever. If it's a screeching thing, we cover our ears, we don't want to hear it, or it's something that makes us laugh or makes us cry. That is the thing, is not only the expression of what's happening in whatever instrument, since we're talking about music, okay, it's also the emotion that it communicates. And that's something that we take and we respond to that, right? And it becomes part of our experience, part of our environment. Whereas, the machine does not have the capacity to process that as an emotion and react in a certain way, which will lead to a different combination of actions, which will lead to a different combination of results, which, when you take all those things together, has an infinite possible number of outcomes that we
And I don't wanna keep going, because
yeah.
if I allow myself to keep going down this path, I'm going to destroy my faith in in man. But so I won't keep going down this path, because again, everything that I wanna say is not necessarily, gonna be good for the human argument here. But the
And that's
let's
okay.
we well again
It's a
it
good
is what it is.
conversation. It
Yeah,
is what
well,
it is.
so let's move away from that necessarily,
Yes, sir.
and let's move toward where you see this going. I mean, because it is like a superpower we're unleashing
Mhm.
here, and
Right.
so organizations, by their very nature, have to begin to implement it. They
Sure.
absolutely have to implement it, or more to the point, if they're just competing with their team of humans against this team of, perfect decision making, they may not be competitive in the, in the current capitalist environment that we've set up, which is, highly competitive. So
It is. Yeah.
so so where do you see this going? I mean, how do you see organizations navigating this path forward? I mean, every company is implementing as much technology as they can afford to implement, to try to optimize everything within their organization to the greatest extent it can be optimized. And this represents a new level of those end results. And so it's not a question of whether people are going to, or whether organizations of any kind, public, private, nonprofit, doesn't matter. They're all going to implement some version of this. How do you see that starting to go down? I mean, who should be thinking about it? How should it be thought of in kind of the top down? I mean, what is the strategic approach first and foremost, and then what is the ethical,
Yeah.
whatever, the compassionate thinking?
Right. So I see this as models improve and as the capabilities are expanded and as the more human-like characteristics or the mimicry of human-like characteristics of the output become more and more sophisticated and closer, become a closer and closer approximation. I see this whole body of work, if done right, if treated right, and if managed properly, I see it as a great equalizer. I see it as a democratizer, meaning that the smaller company has just as much access as the larger company. Now, the larger company throws more money at it and can, get I don't know, better models, better tools, or whatever. But you know, um, uh, I I I think that it needs to be looked at very carefully. Um, Ethical guidelines, need to be put into place with regards to who owns the content, who owns the results, and how should they be disseminated, which individuals who use these tools, right? To what extent must privacy be a factor? Security and privacy, guardrails, and so forth.
It's funny. We haven't been at this very long, and even though it
No, we
feels like,
haven't.
my entire life we've been at it, we really haven't been at this very long in terms of optimizing organizations through technology, right? It's really been,
Mhm.
we did a lot of kind of rudimentary, optimization with PCs and then business networks, and then when the internet hit, which really it only hit 30 years ago or
Yeah.
thereabouts in any kind of force. It hasn't been that long.
Right.
And now with cloud and mobile and kind of more and more processing horsepower, and as much as we talk about LLMs and generative AI, we've had machine learning for quite a while now, and
Oh,
we've
that's
had
true.
algorithms and other things in place for quite a while now.
Well, that's
Um,
just it, Doug. You see, I think the key has got to be to have a human, right? Have a human at the helm, as it were. Okay, a human at the helm, a human with the finger on the pulse, a human oversight. What is it that these machines are being taught? How is the model being trained? Have a human at the, do not have any specific decision to be made by the machine itself. Have the machine present recommendations, present options, the things, as you put it earlier, what is optimal versus what is best, right? The still have the human. The human needs to have the final say. Um, at, at least that's the way I see it.
Well, so right, and I agree with that. I think everybody will agree with that. What may end up happening is you kind of hollow out the organization, and it is a digital delivery and processing and optimized collection of options for the human
Right.
to then make a decision. And so it's almost like a recommendation engine as opposed
Yeah.
to a decision maker. But in the course of creating that recommendation engine, you're eliminating the need for the 11th floor because it can do all that
Mhm.
collection, gathering, you know, normalizing, all the work that people are doing.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Yes, that part you're right. Volume wise, yes. That's quantity, but not quality. I think that maybe a better approach would be let the machine do what the machine does best to free up those humans so that we humans can do what we do best. Okay, so have the decisions being made, all right? So these other people, they can be involved in training the LLM to bring the decisions in other areas. They can create additional products, and train the models to make the recommendations that allow them to arrive at, you know, they have an issue. Some customers have reported an issue. Okay, then have all the different possible reasons for that problem be fed into it. They bring a recommendation, then the technical support people have the tools they need to come up with answers so much more quickly than just scratching your head and trial and error. And what happens? The efficiency improves, morale increases because you have the sense of accomplishment and knowing that, yeah, the LLM helped you, but you came up with something that helped your customer get the answer that they needed so much more quickly than you otherwise would. So you don't necessarily end up eliminating all of the 11th floor. Maybe a few, but not all, because they still have to run things, but with the help of the models.
I went through, the PC revolution. I went through the internet revolution. I know how this typically arrives, and it typically arrives in the form of salespeople, not in the form of technology that we tinker together in a, kind of a home brew. That's how we start playing with it, and
Yeah,
I
right,
taught
right.
myself HTML back in the '90s when I first was exposed
Yep,
to this.
same here.
Um,
Yeah,
but in the end, there is hundreds of billions of dollars being invested by venture capital right now in
right.
new age solutions, AI native solutions that the pitch to receive the investment is we're going to automate the 11th floor. That's how we're going to get your money back. That's how we're going to give you a return on your investment is we're going to take the money that they spend on all those people and we're going to suck it into these subscriptions that we're going to sell them at, 10 cents on the dollar for the cost of a human. And we're going to sell millions of these things. And they don't care what happens to the 11th floor. Actually, they need the 11th floor to be obliterated in order for them to grow revenue and succeed. And so there's going to be this overwhelmingly compelling sales pitch that's coming that's going to say you don't need those people anymore. You just don't need them. And so talk me off this ledge. How do organizations and I think there are going to be different types of decision making here, right?
Sure,
So
sure. Yeah,
raw pure capitalist organizations are going to say, "Yep, we'll
yeah.
take as
And
many
on
as you got, and
That's right.
we're fine with getting rid of the 11th floor because
On
otherwise they may not be competitive anymore if they don't."
Yeah.
But then you're going to have these public organizations, universities and governmental organizations and other nonprofit that are going to look at it differently. I would argue that they don't necessarily need to be as efficient as the most efficient capitalist organization. How do you see this
Yeah.
kind of going?
I say beware. Okay. My hope is that even, there is nothing inherently evil about, and you weren't implying that, of course, but there are the bleeding hearts that will go on the one extreme and decry the evils of capitalism. Then there are the ones that would go gaga all the way to the other extreme and decry the evils of the bad LLM. The AI. The whatever, the Skynet is here, and I'll be back. They still have those who grew up in the '90s and remember Arnold saying "I'll be back." You know,
It's the perfect example, actually,
yeah, it
because
is.
it's said very clearly. It doesn't feel pity. It doesn't care about, it will
That's right.
not stop until it kills you.
Yeah,
It's the
or
perfect
overtakes you. Yeah,
analogy. It
yeah,
doesn't feel pity. Like the
right.
AI doesn't feel, it doesn't have
Anything.
emotion.
Yeah,
It
no,
doesn't
not
ha
at all. That's
Right.
exactly right. And
It
and
just
you
it's
know,
just trying to get the job done
right.
perfectly to the greatest extent that it can.
And that is its overriding number one priority. Okay.
Well, it doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
but
Well, no, it
but if
doesn't
you
have to
wanna
be, but yeah,
but if you want it to be, you're right,
right.
it
Yeah,
will. That will be
exactly.
it is.
And I would like to think that there are enough of us, evil capitalists or whatever, enough of us that would look at it and think, okay, all that glitters is not gold. Right? Yeah, they're all great promises of how incredibly good this is, that it's going to make all these decisions and it's going to do, the work of 86 people on the 11th floor, getting back to that analogy.
Yeah.
Um, but in reality, look at the fine print. Okay. Can it go through all the different nuances of your business? Can it take all those other ramifications into consideration? I mean, yeah, you may end up letting a few people go. Um, but I would caution to look at all the possibilities, to understand that it may not be as good as it's being hyped. If somebody, you can't. There's all different kinds of ways of measuring the success. Again, it is us as humans having the analog and not the digital, right? To be able to see all those differences in between the numbers that the machine can't. And I think, retaining our humanity, retaining our autonomy and our ability to come up with these nuanced ideas and the critical thinking that we talked about earlier, and understand that, yeah, we can't totally get rid of everybody on the 11th floor.
This is where my brain starts to break because
Yeah,
we
mine too.
because because the story that the tech bros are telling is that this is going to usher in an age of abundance, that by eliminating the 11th floor and everybody else in that building and eliminating the need for the building, you reduce the cost of whatever it is that they produce to the point where they can deliver it to you now for effectively, the lowest possible amount. And so now we don't need to spend. I think about I think about televisions in this
Yeah.
analogy. You know, I've spent $3,000 on a pretty crappy television in my day, and that television today I can buy for probably $100.
Yeah.
It's shocking how
Right.
efficient it's become at delivering. They've become way better and they become way cheaper. And I like that.
Sure.
I'm happy
Oh, yeah.
about that. That's abundance to me. I mean, that's a kind of practical abundance. And so the
Yes.
argument is that you're going to eliminate all those people, but you're gonna be able to deliver your product so much cheaper that more people can afford it. More people can get a better version of it. More people can whatever
Mhm.
it is, whatever that is.
If none of those people have jobs, then they won't have the money to afford the
Bingo.
thing that you're selling.
Bingo.
So,
That's
yeah, go
that's where
ahead.
that's where the
Right.
economics breaks.
That's
That's
where it
where the whole
breaks
thing
down,
breaks.
exactly, right, because, you eliminate all those jobs, you eliminate all those people, none of those people are making money, you're able to produce a product incredibly cheap, but nobody has a job, then nobody can buy your product, so where are you? And if nobody can buy your product, you as the CEO who spent $57 million on, the subscriptions to all these people that promised all this stuff, you no longer have the $57 million to spend on the subscription that you took out. And if they don't get their subscription, they go out of business too. And so,
Isn't that the rub, right? I mean,
right,
that the whole
yeah,
thing, and this is
it collapses.
well,
House of
this is
cards.
the problem. It is a house of cards, and
Yeah.
this is my other concern. So it's not going to take very long. Again, I've seen these things over time in my lifetime, and I know what they
Mhm.
look like, and this is gonna
Right.
play out the same way.
It would.
Everybody poo-pooed the internet, and, I'll never put my credit card in there, and that's crazy talk, and, and now everybody doesn't almost nobody buys anything with except with a credit card through, I mean, Amazon or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
so all the naysayers and the poo-pooers are having their moment that this is hallucinating and it's blah blah blah, but that's not how it's going to end up. It's going to get better, going to get way better. It's inevitable,
Absolutely.
and it's
Yeah.
going
And,
to be overwhelmingly better than a lot of what we can do as humans, and we're
right.
not going to be competitive. And you're going to begin to eliminate professions like computer science. I would argue right now that anybody who majors in
Hmm.
computer science is making a mistake, right? I mean, so you have literally computer science programs all over the world that I would argue in 5 years are going to have to struggle to get enrollment. And what happens to the downstream effect of this? It's not like AI is going to come for those professors' jobs one on one, right? An AI isn't going to deliver that professor's work in that
No.
computer science department. The AI is just going to eliminate the revenue because nobody's going to want to go to spend money for that degree. And so all those computer science professors are going to be impacted by the downstream effect that AI is going to have on their occupation.
Mhm. And then 3 or 4 generations later, we'll have people that don't even know their times tables past 4 times 4.
I
And
just saw
that's
some note
yeah,
that said that,
yeah.
that most clocks are in schools are being replaced by digital. The analog face clock is being replaced by digital clocks because students can't use they don't know what the
Oh my
time
goodness,
tell the how to tell the time.
I didn't even think of that, yeah, because 'cause I've seen some kids that don't even know how to read cursive handwriting.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it's like, do we? Do we need to? Are we not basically going to evolve as well, where we will have things in our ears that can potentially when you're traveling in another country, can hear the language being spoken to you and interpret it
Translator.
on the fly, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
respond to them and they'll have a translation. You don't even need to know their language and you can have a perfectly cogent conversation. Like that sounds like a good future to me. You don't
Sure.
need
Well,
to
yeah,
learn a
nothing
new
wrong with that.
language.
Yeah, exactly. That's if that weren't possible, then Captain Kirk wouldn't be able to talk to Klingons. And right, yeah, and, Worf would never have made it on the Starship Enterprise with Captain Picard if it weren't for the Universal Translator. So that's just it. People who poo-poo the tool, all right, don't recognize the fact that there are gobs of benefits. I see a ton of benefits, but at the same time, just because morphine is a wonderful thing. But if you keep a bottle of it and take a few nips here and there, you're gonna screw yourself up and you'll get addicted.
I mean, these kids that are walking around all day long with their face in a screen, I
Oh,
see them
yeah.
all over the place. They're walking down the street with
Right.
their face in a screen.
And going
They
like
they
this all
can't
the time.
put it
Yeah.
down. They literally in front of me, and it was one of my pet peeves, they stop at a stoplight and they immediately look down and they don't see the light turning green because they're immediately looking at their screen. That is a recent phenomenon, but that is not going away.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not gonna go away, and so what's coming is kinda non-negotiable. We're going to become lazy, like, we
Right.
don't use maps because we have a map that tells us
Yeah,
where to
a
go. I mean, we're
GPS, you
gonna
can't
become
read
lazy.
a map, yeah, right,
We
and
are.
that's the whole thing that I'm advocating against is enjoy the tool, use the tool, but don't let the tool I'm afraid that if we get too overly dependent, we're going to become stagnant, okay, and it's not a replacement, it's an enhancement, and we get back to what I said earlier about, creativity do you want it to be stimulated or do you want it to be stagnated? Right? We let it be stagnant, and what do we become? We ourselves become stagnant. We ourselves, constantly, we become again, going back to the mindless automatons. That the human. I just don't see a lot of hope for the human race if it continues along that
Well,
path.
but don't we I mean, isn't that the human condition that we just ultimately seek comfort? That's what we've always sought, and if we didn't
True.
have to work, I mean, I would argue
Yeah,
that if
who
we didn't
would
have
if you
to
didn't
work,
have to?
we wouldn't work
Yeah.
if we didn't have to. That
I
we
would rather yeah, I would
if we could
rather
just
watch TV than,
or travel
yeah,
the world. I
or
mean, if we had
yeah, right.
if we didn't have to, we wouldn't work. We do it because we monetize our time in exchange for the comfort that we can buy, the housing, the clothing, the warmth, the transportation, the freedom that it
Mhm.
enables us to have
Sure.
is why we work at all. It's a
Yeah.
value exchange.
It is,
And
and part of that freedom, though, is also being able to communicate with your fellow man, to be able to exchange ideas, to be able to have an intelligent conversation like you and I are having right now. What's going to happen if we do become so daggum overly dependent upon these tools, then cognitive reasoning that I see the deterioration of the ability to proceed on a coherent pattern of thought. Yeah, when
there's no question about it. This is a
yeah,
cognitive replacement. This is
right.
commoditizing cognition. This is what this does.
Oh,
It
I
gives
like that.
all the answers are free.
Yeah,
Every answer is
and it's
free
right
to
in
you
front of you instantly, but it
instantly.
may
And
not even
so,
be the right answer because you Google, well, what
well,
if you don't check it out?
but it will be.
Well,
That's the thing.
true,
Like
true. It's
it will
yeah,
be. It will be. It's just like credit cards weren't going to be secure on the internet. They will be, and it will be. It will be right.
true,
It,
true.
we can't doubt that. And so then it comes back to the question that I always used to ask in high school is like, do I need to know this? Like, do I need to know this?
The
Really?
difference between a sine and a cosine and a
Right. When am I going to
tangent,
ever
yeah,
need this in my
geometry,
future? Like, do
right.
I need to know this? And honestly, I think kids are going to have a hard time, squaring the circle of why do I need to go to college? What am I going to learn in college that I won't have access to? Like, you don't have the secret information anymore that I need in
Right.
order
You
to
yeah,
succeed.
you can ask
I have
Claude
all
or
the
Copilot
information,
or
more
whatever.
information than you'll ever teach me in my
Mhm.
phone now.
But somebody's gotta provide that practical experience. Who's gonna show you how to replace the compressor in your refrigerator or the, heating element in the dryer in your house, I mean, "Yeah, well, watch a YouTube video." Okay, well, somebody had to create the YouTube video. "Oh, well, it'll be an AI doing it," "It'll be an AI generated character doing it." Yeah, but somebody has to show the AI character how to do it. Yeah, and I don't know. We've got to retain stop the insanity, I say, and retain your humanity. Use the tool. Let it, yeah, be more comfortable and enjoy the benefit that it gives, but do not give up your humanity for crying out loud. You know, um, Question it. maintain control. You are your own person. You are not what ChatGPT says you are. Retain some shred of decency and humanity and sanity. And recognize that these tools will indeed help you and make things better. Just don't let them take over. Replacement, no. I'd rather have an enhancement than a replacement. I'd rather use a lever than be dependent on a crutch. I'd rather be stimulated than stifled. Because yeah, I want to be comforted, but at the same time, we humans, something else that we have, not only our God-given creativity, but we also have the drive to succeed. We also have the drive to accept challenges, some less than others, some who have been coddled all their lives. That innate human desire to better themselves, to challenge themselves, to go a little bit beyond. I know I can hit 50, but maybe next time I can hit 51 or whatever. That psyche, that mentality, that mode of thinking gets dulled, gets atrophied, gets stripped away when the only thing we think about is our own comforts, right? And rather than stifling that, I think we need to proceed with caution, and say, yeah, enjoyment, of course, comfort, yes, make things better, absolutely. But I still want to have my finger on that button. I still
Well,
want to be in charge of what it is that I'm going to think.
Well, and this is honestly, I think this is where again, there's so much more that we could talk about, but this is where education starts to be impacted when you have
Yeah.
to what you just described, people who want to accelerate beyond the way they're being throttled in kind of the classic delivery of education right now, and they want to learn quicker and learn different things and learn at a and have the ability to absorb information
Right.
more so than the kind of mean in the class they're currently in. And so rather than sitting there bored to tears, they're going to want to find and it may be a synthetic, perfectly tuned delivery mechanism that allows them to learn the information more rapidly than they would in the traditional sense of kind of K through 12 or whatever it is. And so then you're off to the races. Then institutions begin to be impacted, begin to and you're going to, I think, to your point, you're going to get inequities from people who
Right.
recognize, there is a human, this can be a human accelerator versus the people who believe this can be the human wheelchair
Yeah.
and they can just hang out and let it kind of push them around. It's fascinating. And I'm going to save the rest of this conversation for the next time we talk because it's great to catch up with you. But we're out of time, and I want to save some of this anyway because I always enjoy
Absolutely.
talking to you, and
As
I
do
think
I.
your take is always good. And again, as I said earlier, you can't AI won't have the charisma of Dr. Joe Perez anytime soon.
You're
So
way too kind. And
thanks.
nor will AI have the kindness of Doug Atkinson, who says these nice things to Dr. Joe. So
Well, thanks
thank
very
you,
much for
sir.
the time. Appreciate you being part of the human conversation, and we'll
Yes,
catch up
sir.
soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.